Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the fourth episode of ESIC, the webinar series focusing on environmental sustainability and sustainable development in international cooperation. Today, we have the pleasure to pass to another topic, very interesting, the sustainable agriculture, agroecology, with three experts with outstanding experience in the field. So the voice of experience will speak with the help of Olivia Serrao, our moderator today. I'm about to pass Olivia all tasks in order to explain briefly how to get the credits and all the other logistics issues. Olivia, you have the floor.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm going to read our notes just to not forget anything. First of all the DCAM Unitrento students with a 75% attendance to the webinars and pass the final test will be awarded 1 credit type F. And students from other departments of Unitrento will have to ask to their department secretariats for credit recognition. We warmly encourage you to register on the Unitrento DOL platform, Didactica Online, where you will find the Zoom link, speaker's presentation, and additional materials. And we would like to inform you again that the webinar will be recorded, so participants can independently turn off their camera. And records will be available in the DCAM YouTube channel very soon, so be patient for a little more. And after speakers talk, there will be space for an inclusive discussion and question-answer session. But then we can just skip to the most interesting part of the webinar. And it's a pleasure, as already Professor Zortea said, to introduce you three experts from the agriculture world. And I would like to highlight that agriculture is a cross-cutting topic in terms of sustainability. I guess then that 13 over the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of 2030 Agenda can be related to agriculture. And our discussion today will especially regard strategies, technologies, and innovations that are implemented in the long-term sustainability agriculture worldwide. And the aim of this section, this webinar, is to point out that farmers all over the world often face the same problems, but the solution adopted must be adapted to the context in which they are implemented to ensure their durability. So let's start with the first speaker, Luca Brentari, who is now introduce a key factor for agricultural sustainability, the management of soil, with a talk entitled Soil Health, the Cross-Cutting Vision to the Environmental Sustainability in Agriculture. Please, Luca, the stage is yours for the next 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Livia. Okay, good evening, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of webinar for inviting me. It's a great pleasure for me to share with you my job and my experience in the environmental system in the international cooperation projects. My name is Luca Brentari, and I'm an agronomist. And since 2003, I've been working for Edmund Mark Foundation as a technical advisor. And Edmund Mark Foundation is a research center founded in 1874. And it's a research center that carries out research and technical consulting activities in the agricultural and the environmental sectors, mainly in Trentino province. But it has also an agricultural school with more than 1,000 students. in particular, I deal with supporting the soft fruits sector in Trento province. Soft fruits, you know, it's strawberry, blueberry, blackberry, raspberry, and so on. But I also deal with supporting projects of non-governmental organization or association that promote the rural and the agricultural development in the developing country in Southeast Asia and Middle East, Balkans region, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South America. By the way, let me to say that I don't really like the term developing country or developed country as a kind of label only for some country in the world, because I think that the developing country, and I think that each country in the world, for one reason or another, is can be considered as a developing country. And I mean, when we talk about developing country or developed country, we are usually referring to the only to the technological or economic point of view. But I think that the real development has many more dimensions, as women rights or human rights in general, childhood rights, environmental development, social development, and so on. And instead, there are many countries in the world that has been considered as a developed country and have a high technological level or very high economic level, but don't have enough human rights or women rights and so on. So the question is, can these countries be considered a developed country? Well, but this is only my opinion. And however, over the past decade, I have worked in projects in Southeast Asia, in East Timor, which, as you know, is a very small and young country that became independent only in 2002 after 24 years of Indonesian rule and after a terrible genocide. But I worked in also in the north of Vietnam, in the Balkans region, in Serbia, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Ivory Coast, and in Uganda, in the northern part of Uganda, in the West Nile. And currently, I'm working on projects in Brazil, in the north part, in the semi-arid zone, about use of saline water for irrigation. In Peru, in the rainforest, about mitigation action against the disastrous effects of climate change, and in Lebanon about the remote control of irrigation. Today, considering the topic of webinar today, namely environmental sustainability and agriculture, I would like to share with you some consideration taken from my experience about one of the most underestimated factor, but extremely connected with environmental sustainability. And this topic is the soil, and in particular, the proper management of the organic matter rate. Well, for this, I'd like to start with an aphorism by one of the most famous soil scientists, Neil Brady. humanity depends on the soil, and to some extent, good soil depends on man and the use he makes. Well, probably this sentence may sound a little bit trivial, but it's well known that the soil is one of the most important agricultural factor closely connected to the environmental sustainability. Instead, most of the time in the agricultural project, and my experience, especially in the international cooperation, this factor is often underestimated, considering the soil only as a container where you can put water or fertilizers, but this is not the case. Well, this graph shows you as the soil is a cross-cutting issue that heavily impact on many agricultural practices. And for example, if you want to plan, this means that if you want to plan in an optimal way, for example, an irrigation project or on a fertilization, you have necessarily to take into account the soil and especially the organic matter rate. Well, specifically, if we talk about irrigation or soil erosion, the organic matter is involved in the building of the structure of the soil structure and improving the soil porosity and improving the water retention capacity of the soil. And this means that a high level of organic matter is capable to reduce or avoid soil erosion and is capable to maximize the effect of an irrigation or maximize the effect of an rainfall. The only thing we have to do is try to increase as much as possible the organic matter rate in the soil, of course. There is no problem if we have a high or very high organic matter in the soil. Don't worry. This is on your right on a graph that you can, you can see the positive correlation between organic rate and the water retention capacity. So this means that if you have a high organic matter rate, you have a high water retention capacity. And this is very, very important in the agriculture. Another example of the huge importance of soil as a cross-cutting agronomic factor, and in particular, especially the organic matter, is for fertilization and chemical weeding. The organic matter, if compared with other soil particles, has a higher cation exchange capacity. Cation exchange capacity is a soil parameter by which we measure the potential soil fertility. So is the parameter capable to retain the nutrients in the soil, avoiding the leaching in depth. So as you can see, that a high level of organic matter is capable to reduce the pollution from an incorrect use of fertilizers or herbicides. Well, probably it may be sounds some strange to talk about herbicide in some place in the world, but for example, in 2020, during a mission in Peru with Livia Serrao, during a mission on a minuscule river island, Livia and I found an empty bottle of famous herbicides. Do you remember, Livia? Yeah. And this means that even in this fragile ecosystem like our river island, the herbicide is used. Okay. Another example is the soil tilling and the suitable crops, the choosing of suitable crop. If we have a high organic matter rate, we have a good soil structure, and we have less chance for ruining the soil during the soil tilling. And another important aspect, extremely connected, closely connected to the soil, is the choosing of suitable crop. And for example, in blueberry crop, blueberry is a species that needs high organic matter rate around 3 or 4% and a pH around 4.5 to 5.5. There is a valley in Trentino, Valsugana, that one side of the valley has an aporphyritic origin. So this slope is characterized by acid soil, suitable for the blueberry crop. But the opposite slope has an calcareous origin, and so completely unsuitable for the crop. And this is an example of importance of soil during the choosing of suitable crop. Okay, in conclusion, in this slide, we have briefly seen the huge importance of soil and the organic matter rate in the soil. Well, now I'm going to show you some example taken from my experience in some project that I'm working on or I worked on. Well, the first project I would like to show you is being implemented in Peru, in the rainforest in the Alto Huallaga region. That it's a region that in the last decades is more and more affected by the disastrous effect of climate change, as strong winds, floods, alternating to drought periods. Well, the specific objective of this project is to mitigate the effects of climate change through mitigation actions. These mitigation actions include, for example, a soil assessment, the establishment of an organic fertilization plan based on soil assessment, the establishment of windbreaks with local plants, the establishment of drainage and drip irrigation system, and the identification of when baby banana variety is more resistant or more tolerant to the strong winds. On your right, you can see regarding the soil assessment. On your right, you can see some results we found in 21 soil samples. You can see the high correlation between organic matter and the cation exchange capacity. And as I told you before, if we have a high organic matter rate, we have a high cation exchange capacity. And as I mentioned it before, cation exchange capacity is the soil parameter by which we measure the soil fertility, excuse me. And so if we have a high organic matter rate, we have a high soil fertility. Unfortunately, in this case, the organic matter values is quite low. As you can see, most of them is below 2%, and some are below 1%, but it is quite frequent in the warm climate, in the tropical climate, because in a warm climate, the organic matter is quickly mineralized, so it's quite frequent to find a low value. In order to increase the organic matter, we have decided to use an integrated approach, and we have decided to use another agricultural practice, namely the intercropping with legumes, namely called kudzu, and Pueraria flaxuloides is the scientific name. This is a legume very aggressive varieties of legumes that needs to be cut frequently, producing a high amount of organic matter, and in the same time is capable to fix, as all the legumes, to fix the nitrogen from atmosphere. As I told you before, the importance of the choosing of a suitable crop in this project with Livia, we are carrying out an experimentation in which we are going to evaluate the tolerance level of 3 varieties of baby banana, and the specific objective is to identify the most tolerant varieties to a strong wind. On your right, you can see the experimental design, and on your left, and banana cultivation completely destroyed by strong winds. Okay, another project I would like to show you is being implemented in Brazil. Is Brazil and Trentino new opportunities for co-development, and this is in the semi-arid region in the northern part of Brazil, and this is a very large project, and one of the activity is about use of saline water for irrigation, and we are carrying out an experimentation in which we are going to evaluate the best irrigation schedule with saline water. And due to the saline soil for this experimentation, it has been chosen a local varieties of cacti for animal feeding, very resistant to salinity. And this is another example of choosing of suitable crop. Okay. Another example is in this project I worked on in Uganda, the wealth creation through fruticulture in the western part of West Nile. West Nile is northern part of Uganda, is the poorest region of Uganda, mainly characterized by poor agriculture. And in this project, in this case, due to the long drought period, it has been chosen plants of mango from seed. Therefore, plants with very deep roots capable to intercept water in depth, escaping from drought. Okay, this is another example. As a last project, I show you a food security project that I worked on in 2009 in East Timor. It's a food security project called the Integrated Rural Development for Food Security in Aotearoa Island. Aotearoa Island is one of the two islands belonging to East Timor. In this project, this was a project based on the establishment of community gardens using, as you can see in the first picture, using compost to increase the organic matter. Okay, this is the end. Thank you for attention. And now I give the floor to my friends and colleague, Marco Tasin.
Thank you, Luca, for this incredible overview on your experience, your worldwide experience. And yeah, I think that most of the participants have a lot of questions now, but we can wait for the end of the two next speakers to ask. And so skip to the next presentation. Now it's time to give the floor to Marco Tasin, who is presenting the concept of agroecology, and is giving us some examples of the new bottom-up food systems from his own experience. So, Marco, you have 20 minutes by now, and please.
Thank you very much. Can you see the screen? Is it shared?
Yes, it's
yes.
not full screen.
It's not full screen.
No.
So I got a problem, Houston. Let's see if I can fix it. Oops. What happened now? Can you help me? Because I cannot get the screen back. Something happens here.
Click on the bottom of the slide.
Yeah.
Side,
that
side.
one. Okay.
That's one. Okay,
Now
great.
it's good?
Yeah, now
Okay.
see. You can see perfectly. Thank you.
Small trouble.
Don't worry.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for inviting me here and giving me the chance to present what I have learned in all these years, being a grower and having also the chance to teach at the university in Sweden and in Norway, and to see many examples of agroecology around the world. Now I'm back in Trento. I'm still doing some research, but the challenge for me now is to put in practice agroecology in my family farm. So I started to change a little bit, and we had many discussions also with my father about his way of doing agriculture. And surprisingly now he is also coming near to my view. So we are having a very nice time together. And that's really amazing. I'll tell you first what is agroecology. Agroecology, here I like to present three point of views. The first is Stefan Gleesman, which is one of the guru of the subject. He is emeritus at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I have the pleasure to meet him, and he says that agroecology is ecological, economic, and social changes. It has to be three of them, otherwise it's not agroecology. So it's science, practice, and social justice movement all together. Instead, Pablo Titonel, he works in Argentina. He says that agroecology is a knowledge-intensive way of farming, bringing together academy, practice, social movement towards a dialogue of wisdom. And I like what he says, because he says agroecology is farming with nature, in alliance with nature, rather than against nature. Miguel Altieri, he is also now retired. I think he's in Venezuela, perhaps, and farming as well. He's back to farming after a brilliant career at Berkeley. And he says agroecology is ecologically rational, socially activating, and culturally acceptable. It is based on, of course, local resources, information exchange, active participation. And then he says also it is the way towards the non-fossil fuel-based agriculture. So as you can see here, we have a lot of things together, but basically what comes to the surface here is a sustainable way of farming, which is working together with nature and respecting local knowledge, respecting traditional knowledge, but also bringing in all the good from science, and also respecting very much the social context. So respecting what is there from a human point of view. Now I cannot go down. Let's see here. Okay. I like to show here what our students propose for agroecology. At the beginning of our master course, we challenge our students to put together a definition of agroecology. This is the definition from 2018. You see here there is some creativity around, but basically is bringing in a lot of point of views and factors from the society. Why do we need agroecology? Well, if we look at the overall situation on the planet, this document that was prepared by 15,000 scientists, it said that we are now in a situation where we need to change. We need to change our way towards a stewardship of the earth and the life, because otherwise we will go to a collapsing situation. And the citizens must take an active role to governments. And with a groundswell of organized grassroots effort, this is the way to bring about the change. One example here that is given in the paper is these 9 parameters. And you see here, all of them, freshwater resources, dead zone in the sea, total forest, vertebrates abundance, and so on. They are dramatically decreasing over time, but there is one parameter which gets better. And that's the first up in the left corner, and it's ozone depleters. And you see here the percent or the level of ozone in the atmosphere is nowadays almost re-established after a great collaborative effort all over the world. So this means if we act together, if we want to do it, we can do it. So as we do it for the ozone layer, we can do it for other things. So there are no excuses actually. But we need to be fast. Why? Well, you know better than me why. Here I'm just coming up with some example. You see the red zone here in this graph are telling us that we are almost at 0 with mineral phosphorus on the planet. We are fixing too much nitrogen for the atmosphere. We are eutrophicating a lot of our water system. The genetic diversity, excuse me, of crops is going down dramatically. And so for example, for these 3 things, the planetary boundaries are already achieved. In addition to that, we know that people in Tuvalu, Kiribati, and so on, they are already under half a meter of water, and they have to leave their islands because there is no water anymore for agriculture. Everything is salty water now. 98 of the Haiti forest is cut, and so on and so on. So here the question here, do we have enough resources to go for a second green revolution as promoted by multinational corporation under the name sustainable intensification? Well, it looks we cannot do that. Why? Because we are going towards a dead-end system. Like for example, in Borneo, we are already destroying a big percent of the forest to plant palm oil trees. And similar situations are happening with the ice at the poles and with the temperature all over the planet. We know that about 95% of the scientists, they confirm that climate change is not a random thing, and that the probability of highest temperature registered in the last year in absence of climate change is very near to 0. We have a plus 400% in the last 20 years of extreme atmospheric disaster. Big fire, this is Amazon last year. And if we want to measure what is happening at in our life, we can easily go in at the overshoot.org site and measure our footprint calculator. And I did it today, and I was thinking to do quite good, you know, but I'm doing really bad. My overshoot day is May 8th. So I really need to push down my consumption of resources, as many of us, I guess. A great example of that is what happened in Bhutan. Bhutan is a very small country in Asia, and it's I think it's the only country on the planet with a carbon negative balance. So it means they are fixing more carbon dioxide than what they are releasing. And this approach is really amazing because it's not a very rich country, but they decided somehow they want to keep natural resources and they want to keep the nature alive in their country, and they went for this carbon negative policy. So if they did it, we can also do it. But where are the countries with the highest level of food insecurity at the moment? You see here Sub-Saharan Africa, some part of Asia, as Luca mentioned before. And at the same time, it's not just a question of food insecurity, but it's a question also of food policy and price all over the planet. So all these parameters, which I don't have the time to go into detail now, but together with land grabbing, are really determining for those countries a situation which is not easy to face. But looking at this problem, do we really need, as I said before, a second green revolution to feed the growing population on the planet, as many multinational companies are promoting? Well, the FAO says that it is not needed, because we are already producing enough food today to feed the entire population of the world. But yes, we have still 800 million people hungry. Basically, it's the same number as we had in the 70s. So nothing has changed. Just the population of the planet is growing, but the people greatly suffering are more or less the same. And I would say more or less in the same region of the planet. So if we don't agree with the first green revolution, maybe some of you don't know exactly what this was, but this happened in the 50s and in the 60s with the availability of new varieties, super productive varieties, which require higher use of fertilizer, pesticides, and mechanization of the fields. So this green revolution was promoted as the solution of many, many problems in the world. But if this concept brought us high productivity, at the same time, we also had ecosystem problems. As we know, we lost many species. We have now a very simplified landscape. We have water and soil which are contaminated, and at the same time, we have a low resilience to climate change. Then we have diet problems. We are eating too much meat and carbohydrates, and we are eating too few nuts, fruits, and vegetables. And this led also to the structuration of local communities and local economies. For example, there is oligopoly in the supply and inside the food chain. So this creates real social problems in our countries. And then we have the loss of social role of farmers. Very often farmers are trapped in a treadmill economy with lower and lower profits. And they are not farmers anymore. They are workers for some large companies or cooperatives or whatever, deciding the prices, and they don't have any power on the market. This is what we created. But let's have a look in the past, and let's see, when did we really start to mess up with ecosystem? Well, we started to mess up with ecosystem when we started with agriculture. And basically 10,000 years ago, this is an article from Barnowski from 2008, which I really recommend you to look at, because it shows that when the human biomass took over the megafauna biomass, that started more or less our big impact on our planet. And this continued until today. And in particular, after the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we had a huge and exponential increase of the livestock that we are rearing, thanks to cheap fossil fuels. So about 10 years ago, we started with this system, and until, let's say, the Industrial Revolution, we were more or less keeping the population, our human population, below the capacity of the planet, which is about 2 billion people or something like that. But after the Industrial Revolution, we started to greatly mess up with the resources of the planet. And now we are at a point that we really need to do something, otherwise the future might not be so good. Let's see where are the most critical area in which a change is needed. Well, as you can see here, we have parts of Africa and parts of Asia, which will have and have already a huge growing population. Why Europe, Latin America, Northern America, and Oceania are more or less stable. So the chance is in these two continents. And after looking at where are the big challenges, let's see who is producing our food, especially in those two continents. Women are the producer of over 70% of the world's food, according to a recent research. And we also know that 97% of the farms are smaller than 2 hectares. So when we go out here, for example, in Trento, and we see a 5 hectares farm, that is an exception. The usual farm in the world is much smaller. We also know that 70% of the food is produced by smallholders using 20% of the arable land. And that 30% of the food is produced by industrial farmers on the 80% of the arable land. These numbers are variable according to the source, and some of them might not be reflecting the reality, but this is telling us that smallholders are much more efficient than large farmers. This we have to keep it in mind, and that women are a very, very important actor in this, in the production of food. If we look at the size of the farm and the output, we see that a small farm, like for example, the one here on the left with 4 acres, is actually producing more than per unit surface than a big farm like the one with 6,000 and more acres. So why a small farm is more efficient than a large farm? There are several factors here, including the efficiency in the use of resources, the use of biodiversity, and the optimization of the cropping system. Going a little bit more into details, you can see that when we look at Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, which are at the top of this graph on the left, we have contribution to world total percent on the y-axis and productivity per hectare on the x-axis. You see here that Africa and Asia, they have relatively low productivity, but they contribute anyway to quite a large part of the production. While Western Europe, US, and so on, they have a very high productivity, but altogether, the so-called developed world is less than 15% of the total food. So it means that more than 80% of the food is produced in those countries that we mentioned before, so Africa, Asia, and then, for example, a little bit in Eastern Europe and South America. What does it mean? It means that we need to concentrate really much in increasing the productivity on those countries that needs, that are under huge population growth. And those countries are the same which are facing most resource constraint, climate change, and so on. So we don't need to increase the productivity in Europe, in North America, and so on, but we can rather do a decrease in the intensification in the use of the landscape in our countries, because we are producing already enough food, and it will be not optimal to produce food here and to transport the food down to the places where it's needed. It's much more smarter to increase the productivity where it's needed. Those countries, but not only those, are also facing the problem of soil degradation, as Luca were mentioning. And believe it or not, 25% of the arable land on the planet is already in a very degraded state, with, which means a situation like this. Why do we have this kind of situation? Well, when we start tilling a soil, you see the amount of organic matter here on the graph on the left, it drops dramatically to about 50% after only 25 years. This means that from 1950 to today, soil tillage has contributed to a release of about 50 petagrams, which is 10 to the 9 tons in the atmosphere. So our green revolution approach with big machinery, with big tilling machines has greatly contributed not only to soil degradation, but also to greenhouse effect. We also need to look at animal production on the planet, because a major proportion of greenhouse gases is released by agriculture, and animal production is requiring not only huge amount of water, but also huge amount of land. So this needs to be taken into consideration, because about 14.5% of greenhouse gases comes from animal production, and all over agriculture and forestry are responsible for 13% of carbon dioxide, 44% methane, and 82% of nitrogen oxide, for a total of about 23%. So this needs to be considered in our agricultural current system. It's not sustainable. But I wanted to see with you if maybe the intensification of agriculture, it's already on the way, at least in European countries. You see here the release of greenhouse gases by agriculture. If you take, for example, the green line, you see here that over the years, we managed in EU to decrease the amount of greenhouse gases quite a lot. So this means that once more, like for the ozone layer, if we act together, it is actually possible to have an impact quite rapidly in maybe 10 years or so. This refers also to the diet. If we could, for example, shift a little bit our diet and consume less animal food, we will help incredibly our environment. You see here, for example, European average diet takes about half an hectare per person per year, while a vegetarian diet takes 0.07 hectare per person per year. So that means that with one football field, we can feed 1.5 person with a normal diet, but we can feed 10 person with a vegetarian diet. So this needs also to be considered. I don't know if I have some time left. I try to finish up.
Yes, yeah. 2 minutes more.
Okay, so waste. We are wasting about 40% of our food. We need to reduce also waste. I'm going a little bit faster, otherwise I don't finish. And so this book, which I really recommend you, says that biofuel, concentrated animal feed, excessively meat based diet and post-harvest food waste are regarded very often as given rather than challenging the irrational. So here we need to challenge all these production system. And I think I don't have time to go through this, but basically I wanted just to say that the share of the farmer is getting smaller and smaller, and much of the profit is getting to other market actors. And few young people are attracted by farming, of course. And just to finish, the current food system is not socially sustainable because it is in the hands of very few actors that you see here. And the same happens from the other side, where the products for agriculture are in the hand of few multinational companies. So what to do? Remember, it is not important what we have lost, but what we have left. And as someone says, it is too late to be pessimistic. So what I propose, and also in accordance with other people, is ecological intensification of the current food system. Here you have some example where not only we need to substitute our inputs with more sustainable inputs, but we need system redesign. We need to transit from monocultures, which requires huge amount of inputs, to ecosystem, in which ecosystem services are used. And here you can see the 5 levels of transition, which unfortunately I cannot go into details. And we need to give power to local smallholders and their local knowledge. And we need to encourage social movement like this one, for example, Food First, that is promoting organic, locally grown food, urban agriculture, and so on. We have even one here in Trentino called Ortazzo, for example. We can promote designing pest suppressive landscape with participatory projects, including people living in agricultural areas. We can create new ecosystems. This is one example from a participatory design of new orchard in which I was involved in a European project. This is already active in France. We can use intercropping. This is an example from colleagues in Sweden. They are intercropping cereals with legumes, and they are getting higher amount of dry weight, less weeds, more grain, and more protein than soil crops. We can think about agroforestry system in which the efficiency, the energy efficiency, and the mineral efficiency is higher than monocultures. And then we can also look at what happened recently, where toxic compound like this one and other that are toxic for bees were capably taken out from the market, thanks to 5 million people signing a petition that was directly brought to European Parliament. So people's voice needs to be there if we really want to transit to agroecology. We also need to think about biocontrol in our crops. We have very, very often crops which are desert for natural enemies and for predators. We need to come in with nectar sources, for example, like these flowers. So it is possible to have a landscape like this one, for example, where we have still kind of monoculture, but nearby we are providing resources for predators and for natural enemies and small mammalians. This is an example in which I took part, and we experimented here in Limburg flower strips inside apple orchard, and we were able to measure a higher biocontrol and possibly a decrease of pesticides. We also need to provide our ecosystem with refuges for birds, for other kind of arthropods. And we need to develop bio-intensive system like this one in France, for example, where on a small surface, these people were able to produce huge amount of vegetables and fruits using only manual tool and compost. You may find more information on these books, and for example, Elliot Coleman is a very nice overview of this system. So this goes in this direction towards ecological intensification of our landscape and food system. And I made this graph for our situation in Trentino, where most of the farmers are at the first level, so conventional agriculture. We can improve our conventional system by optimizing water, optimizing the use of minerals and so on. And then we can go to step 2, substituting toxic inputs with organically allowed inputs, but it's still a substitution. It's not really a big change. And then we can go to the third level to transform our monoculture in an ecosystem. And then we can connect with consumers. And then we can go to the fifth level, which is to change the whole food system at the world level. I wanted just to tell you that the signals are good also at the European level, because the European Commission finally got aware that the common agricultural policy is not agroecological at all, and they needed to change. And I was amazed that they asked to scientists, how can we develop a more sustainable CAP? And in this paper, some colleagues put together the action needed for the EU policy to become more sustainable. And I think it's a very good signal that even the EU is opening to recommendation from other people. So this is very good. Last but not least, I invite you to the Agroecology Day organized by our students next week, where Stefan Glisman will have a lecture. I think it's a very nice occasion to know more about agroecology. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm giving here some recommendation in case you want to go deep in this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco. It was a really interesting presentation and full of information. And I hope that we will have enough time later to discuss together about the bottom-up initiatives that you mentioned in your speech. And now it's time for our last presentation by Giuseppe Fustini, who is gonna to present us his own experience, an example of the smallholder producers in Trentino. And I don't want to spoiler more, so please, Giuseppe.
Thank you, Livia. Hello to everybody. Now I'm sharing the Sorry. Okay. We can start.
Great.
Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to present our farm. My name is Giuseppe Fustini. I'm 30 years old, and I grew up in a dairy farm in Trentino, where in a small municipality of Comano Terme, where I work right now. And we are located in Trento province, in a small village called Sesto, a real small village. In our business, we think that is important to provide a good place for people, high standard of welfare for the animals, and good care for their for the environment. We cultivate about 63 hectares of permanent grassland, 55 hectares of maize, and 24 hectares of potatoes that is sold with a small brand called Montagnina, and it is a mountain potato. In 2011, we installed a biogas plant that allow us to improve all the farms and the feed management. So improve animal health, better use of natural resource, creating a circular economy. Our farm installed a lot of technology, an automatic cleaning of the barn, an automatic control and management of the biodigester, an automatic cooling system of the cows, and a robotic feed pusher, and some sensors on the animals that give us a lot of data. Also, the installation of a photovoltaic plants decrease dependency on external inputs. The biogas plant reduce atmospheric emissions and others, and this help a lot with relationship with tourists and neighbors. We can say that all the fertilizer is cow's manure, and so we create a circular economy, and we have a lower carbon footprint. We can say that part of the dried digestate is sold to other farmers that cultivate hortofloriculture, like wine or apple fruits. And a part is packaged in 20 kilo bags, and is called terra di cerere, and is sold for the cultivation of the city gardens, so for the urban, the so-called urban farmers. With the biodigester, we improve the natural fertilization at the right time for the crops. So we are more efficient, more environmental friendly. We start using GPS on some vehicles to seed, to fertilize, and to harvest. So we can say that we use less energy, fuel, water, and we save a lot of time. Thank you to everybody, and sorry for my not perfect English.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Don't worry, your presentation was really interesting, and of course, I mean, you gave us an example of not so smallholder farm, I guess. So thanks again for your interesting presentation. And now we have some time for the questions and curiosities, and if someone of you want to break the ice and exploit these incredible opportunities to ask something directly to people who's working in, don't be shy.
Excuse me, Livia.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Marco for the great presentation. I knew I'm only an agronomist, but Marco is also a beautiful soul.
Wow.
Beautiful mind. Yeah. Thank you, Marco, for the great presentation.
Thanks.
Luca, your camera is off anyway. I don't know if it's a case or not. Okay, now we can see you.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry for the delay. Unfortunately, Luca, I could hear your presentation, but I could join the Marco and the Giuseppe presentation. And I would like to ask a question to Marco, because in the graph, the critical point is the relationship between producer and consumer. So I know that there is a project in Trento, Nutrire Trento, that is trying to solve this critical point. I don't know if you already spoke about that project, but probably if you could spend 2 words about that project would be very useful for probably also for the discussion.
Yes, thank you, Marco, for bringing up this project. This project is very nice because it was promoted by Trento municipality along with University of Trento. I think the main faculty involved is sociology, but I think also engineering is involved. And it started with a working table that was bringing nearby producers, consumers, some other actors, some experts, some policymakers, and so on. And it ended up with 2 phases. And now we are actually at the 3rd phase, where we presented our products to consumers, to eaters, and they were positive about. And we created together with them an association, which is called Naturalmente in Trentino. And this association will actually take off next Sunday in one of our farms, where we as producers will meet the eaters, the consumers, and we will offer some of our product to eat. And we will start this journey. So it's I'm looking forward to that. And I think this is as you, Marco, said, it could be a nice example of level 4 agroecology. So it is possible to do it, yeah.
I have one more consideration regarding both the Marco and the Giuseppe relation. So there is a big agri-tech environment emerging to provide to agriculture new solution. And there are a lot of IoT, AI, so Internet of Things, artificial intelligence solution. My consideration or question is, how could we try to join the agroecology approach with the agri-tech emerging technologies? So for example, so Giuseppe Fustini is involved in a European Space Agency project, where also my company is involved. And we are often just looking at the technical point of view, but probably we should start to share ideas to mix the agroecology approach, the new association emerging to create a better relationship between producer and consumer. So this is probably most a consideration. Basically, it's not a question, but okay, if you have any, if anyone in the room wants to add more, is welcome.
I can say that agroecology is not restricted to small farms, but there are plenty of business opportunities also at the higher level. So there are quite large farms, both in Europe and, for example, in South America, which are applying agroecology principles, using proper machineries, paying much attention to efficiency in resource use and in tillage, So agroecology doesn't say that we don't have to use machinery and so on, but it just says that we need to be extremely careful on our way of producing food. So it is not only about small farms, but I think the challenge here is to take all the good things about small farms and to be able to transfer them into larger cropping system. I don't think it is impossible because, for example, in Holland, a colleague of mine in a participative
It's gone.
Something crashed.
We lost
Yeah.
him in Holland.
Probably we can.
I don't know if in the meantime, Luca
is
or
like
Giuseppe
a priest.
want to add something.
Marco is like a priest.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We'll take a picture. So if there is any other question, probably we can skip to other question, Lydia, and then we can go back to the answer.
Yeah, if it's possible, I'd like to talk about considerations about the organic matter in the warm climate. So in our country, is normal to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% of organic matter. But if we talk about climate or tropical climate, where the international cooperation work, there is some problems regarding the organic matter rate, because in the warm climate, the organic matter is quickly it's quickly mineralized, and so it's a very problem. I talk about organic matter, but honestly, in the international cooperation is not easy. It's quite difficult to maintain the organic matter or increase the organic matter. So as Marco told you before, we have to implement an integrated approach with many agricultural practice. And basically, there are 2 ways to increase or maintain a good level of organic matter, either by adding organic matter or by slowing down the mineralization of organic matter. And in the second way, we can talk about agroecology or conservative agriculture. In the first way, we have practices are organic fertilization or intercropping with other species, crop rotation with legume or green manure. And in the second way, we talk about conservative agriculture and include, for example, as Marco mentioned before, the minimum tillage or of soil or sod seeding, namely the seeding on unplowed soil, or avoiding that the soil is without vegetation for a lot of time. This is my consideration, and because it seems easy to increase the organic matter, but it's quite easy here in our temperature, but in the tropical country, it's quite difficult. If we if we implement agricultural practice to increase or to maintain, we increase for 1% of organic matter in 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay, so it's quite longer than we are used to.
But for this question, I give the floor to Marco, who can give you probably a more complete consideration.
Excuse me, I was cut off by my own internet.
No,
great. We lost you in Holland, I guess.
No, I said that it is not easy to increase the organic matter in the soil, and in the tropical climate, in the warm climate, it's quite difficult to increase or to maintain because of temperature, of high temperature. This is my consideration.
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
And Marco, and in your opinion, what is the main problem from an agroecosystem point of view here in our province, or in general in Italy?
I think for me, I was passing through several steps in my life, and some 20 years ago, I was, a fan of spraying. So I was also sitting in my fancy tractor with air conditioning and spraying out whatever it was needed. I remember one day I was putting things in the tank, and I was asking myself, there must be another way to produce food. This is absurd that we spray 28 times our apple with compounds that have a toxicity, and we still call it sustainable. So there must be another way. So in my opinion, one thing that we could do, for example, is to transform part of our monoculture into bio-intensive systems in which we don't produce only apples or grapes, but we produce a lot of things together. Like in my small field here, I'm producing about 42 different crops. So I'm having fruits, I'm having vegetable, I'm having functional plants that are giving me nectar, that are giving me overwintering sites for predators, that are fixing nitrogen, and so on. And if we could establish such spots, perhaps around the villages, we could already avoid a big portion of sprays that are now affecting schools and kindergarten and so on. And that would be already a big step. And for example, I calculated that only by transforming 3,000 hectares of our 20,000 hectares of monoculture, we could produce fruits and vegetables for 500,000 people, which is the whole population of Trentino. So it is possible to do a local production. It is possible to jump out from this monoculture trap. And there is no big technical issues here. It is doable, but we need, I think, pressure from the grassroots, pressure from people, pressure from eaters that says, look, we want another system, we want another landscape, and let's develop it together. And I don't know if I answered to your question, but this is what I'm thinking about now.
Thank you.
Yeah, clear. Anyone has another question? Okay, Massimo, please.
Yeah, connecting to this last sentence by Marco, I would like to underline that, in my opinion, and according to my experience in even in development cooperation experiences. The challenge is how to transform supply chains into value chains. And up to now, this was a task to very niche experiences such as fair trade or responsible agriculture, etc., common consumption groups, etc. But up to now, we have to promote a different culture. So we have to pass to monoculture in terms of agricultural production to a very open culture in mind of consumers, because otherwise the business as usual will go on as today. For instance, we are not calculating in our families how much is the waste, the food waste, or the average food waste we are simply throwing out. And the monitoring culture is not inside our mind. So what about it? I'm asking all the three, even to Giuseppe, and congratulations your concept of integral production, even by bioproducts, etc. This is the typical mainstreaming culture, integrating in a transversal way all the issues. But in the mind of consumers and in all the other rings of the supply chains, there's no value in these efforts, I'm afraid. So what about it, friends? Thank you.
I guess that the speakers are just afraid about your question, Massimo, because it's a very huge question. So
it's a global question. How
yes,
supply chains in value chains.
It's gonna answer first.
I don't know if maybe Giuseppe wants to say something.
Okay.
Yes. But here we are in a how to say, in a cooperation system that help us to promote the product, because lots of quantity of milk that we made is impossible to promote singular. Is my opinion, but for the, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the Trentino context is quite original in terms of global
as an history, a particular history that based on cooperation, on social
network,
not network, but see.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Luca, who has a more international experience, can add something about this kind of paradigm that we need to change.
Well, it's a very heavy question. It's a very difficult question because there are many factors that work in one sense or in another sense. Yeah, I think that the best approach is the approach that Marco told you before. The agroecology is, for me, the best way for the future. There is, in my opinion, there are no other way in my opinion. It's very complicated to talk about this argument, but the solution is to increase all the dimensions of the sustainability, and starting to the environmental sustainability, that is the most underestimated sustainability in the diagram of sustainability. And so this is my opinion. At the global level, we are now at an important point. We may win, or we may lose our planet. There is no other way.
No plan B for us.
But of course, we have many countries in the world, many situations, so many solutions, in my opinion. There is no one solution for all the countries. There is more than one solution. But agroecology give, in my opinion, more solution than other approach in the agriculture. What do you think of, Marco?
Yeah, the positive side of this approach is that it's taking into account not only production, not only economic sustainability, but is considering at the same time social sustainability and ecological sustainability. So
exactly,
is evaluating, let's say, all the factors all together. So if I drive with my tractor and I'm spraying some compound, and these compounds will go into the river, then I'm killing the fishes and the predators and all whatever is there, and it will probably take several years to reestablish. So maybe this compound is better to not use it, or to find another alternative. But at the same time, agroecology says the big monoculture where one guy sits on a tractor and can cultivate 300 hectares of land without getting off even from the tractor and touching the earth. This is also something that is taking my heart away from nature. It's taking me away from what I'm doing. So it is about cooperating with nature to give a safe environment also for next generations. So I think this is a plus from this approach. And of course, agroecology is sharing this approach with other approaches like permaculture, like regenerative agriculture, like Fukuoka agriculture, and so on. So agroecology doesn't say that this is the only way, but it's rather, I like to call agroecology, as a friend of mine says, is not a discipline, but it's a process. It's a path. We are all involved in this, and we are creating this every day. So it's up to us what we want to create, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes, and if I can add my opinion, I see that there are positive signals and negative signals, even in policymakers. For instance, as you know, recently in Italy, we have Parliament has approved a new law on bioagricultural production, at least. And the European Commission is asking for 25% of biological production on all the global surface of cultivating areas by 2030. In Italy, we have more or less this average, but the European average is 80% only, just 80%. So we have 1/3 up to the final goal of 25%. But I'm afraid that we have to change the demand by consumers. Otherwise, the offerings or the opportunities to be more sustainable in producing and distributing the agricultural products will not be enough. So what about introducing more restricted practices by awarding the producers? I am thinking of the PAC. The new framework of PAC is still pending to industrial production, unfortunately, and despite these new positive signals. But we have to change the demand by 500 million people of consumers. Otherwise, the policymakers and the institution will be driven by the pushing factors in terms of production, low-cost production, and consumers are encouraged to buy more and more apple at a lower price instead of buying less quantities of apple and fruits and vegetables at an upper price. What about this vision, friends?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that the consumers or the eaters, as we call it, mangiatori, they are more or less the one cutting the melon, the one deciding. So if in the system there is not enough people willing to get clean food from a nice landscape, this probably will not change because, as you said, the policymakers are not pushed towards this end. As I showed you before, the EU took away from the market toxic neonicotinoids, like the one we were using here on the whole surface. It was called imidacloprid, and it was causing the collapse disorders in bees. They took it out from the market only because AVATS collected 5 million signatures. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it, because I was in Brussels and the office of the European Commission, on the other side of the road in Brussels, there is the office of Bayer, the office of Syngenta, and the office of Monsanto. So these guys are there, they just cross the road and they go to the commission member every day, pushing them to keep those pesticides on the market. But in this case, 5 million, they couldn't simply do it. So it is in the hands of citizens to change this kind of agriculture, I guess. And I guess it's also under, I mean, it's very clear now when we wake up in the morning, we look at our valley and we see this monoculture from, I don't know, from Bolzano down to the end of our valley is the same thing. I mean, it's apple with this plastic on top and so on. And I mean, maybe we deserve a nicer landscape than that. And do we really want it? Then we have to fight for it, I think.
Yeah, we have to be aware about the existence of the lobbyists category. It's not a negative terms in politics. If you know that you think that in Brussels there are more lobbyists than in Washington, almost 100, 600 lobbyists, but there are no lobbyists from categories such as universities or research centers, for instance. And I'm convinced that we have to be more strong in connecting. I was a signer of the AVAS appeal against glyphosate, so I know very well that fight. But at the same time, it's a lost fight if we will go on in beating the same button. It's harmful, okay. But even the transformation of all the global economy is harmful if we are not preparing a transition. Ecological transition doesn't make sense if pretend to change everything We are simply giving a fake vision of the world. We cannot change all the world, all agroecological production system with simply pushing a button. Click here to put your signature in that appeal. So, I mean, it's a very important effort, this reflection we are making all together, but we have to transform our sensitivity as a sense of accountability as consumers, in my opinion. And for instance, university is not transmitting at all, still not transmitting the sense of urgent accountability in each student. And we are trying in our path in development cooperation, specialization from territorial and environmental engineer, but we should be more effective in spreading this sensitivity all around the university, students, scholars, etc. This is my humble opinion, of course.
Thanks. And I think that we have enough time for the last question from the audience. So if someone of you want to ask the last question.
I would like to ask a question to all the speakers. And it is a very practical question, so maybe much easier. And what are your suggestions for the young generation that would like to invest their time, their energy in agroecology, in going back, touching the soil, considering, of course, that first of all, we have to be aware consumer, but apart from being consumer, what are your suggestions if a young generation would like to invest their time in agriculture, in agroecology, and how would you help them? Which are your tips to have the young generation going back to agriculture?
We are all shy. No, Luca.
Well, my suggestion is the new generation have, first of all, to study as much as possible, all the link between microorganisms, plants, etc. And they have to know that they have to study, and they have to have an approach as practical as possible to touch every day the plants, the soil, and so on. And to develop a more sensitive approach to the global problems.
Okay. Shall I go?
Yeah, sure.
For me, I would say just come to one of our farms here in Trento. We are open to host a lot of people, and you can come here and looking at what we are doing and do something with us and see if you like it or not.
So practical training, you suggest? Okay, great.
Yes, it is. Not only in the office, okay? Not only in the office, especially in the field.
So I will knock your door.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think that we can just say goodbye to each other. But before closing this webinar, I think that Nicola would like to take a snapshot from the screen while I'm looking for the schedule for inviting you to the next webinar. What it is? Here we are. Oh, thanks, Massimo. Okay. The next webinar will be held on 5 May, next Wednesday. And we will talk about the water, energy, food nexus with Elisa Calamita. Damn it, there's some problem in the name. Anyway, Elisa Calamita and Francesco Castelletti from Politecnico of Torino. And the last speaker that has to be confirmed yet. Anyway, the time is the same, and also the link of the Zoom. I hope that you enjoyed our webinar today, and I feel that we have learned a lot of things to think about. And I again thanks our three experts that have shared with us their knowledge and their experiences. So if you want to turn on your camera, I think that Nicola is ready to take a photo of us. If you agree, of course. Thank you. So here we are.
Everybody.
Nicola, tell us to smile when it's time. 1 second. Okay. 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 Do you want to drink a coffee? I didn't get you. Did you? No.
It was perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So thanks again and goodbye. See you on Wednesday.
And thank you, Livia, for the moderation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Livia. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, bye.
Bye bye.
If
Bye
the
bye.
speakers and the organizing team want to just